For this video, I'm going to go over SNAT, which is Source Network Address Translation. So you know how we added, this is following multiple backends at load balancer video. So we had the Windows pool, and now we have the Linux pool. And so now, if we get traffic from the internet, through port 80 or wherever, it goes through the load balancer and to the Linux VM. But what if we want to do the opposite, that we want to, download the file from the internet from the Linux VM? So you go to VM and out to the internet. That's what you use source network address translation for. It rewrites the IP address of the backend to the public IP address of the load balancer. So since the Linux VM itself doesn't have a public IP, it's using the front end IP that we made for it in the load balancer. It can't do the normal request to the internet like it normally does when you create a VM. And I guess that function of SNAT is called IP masquerading of the backend instance, and it simplifies the need of having a public IP address for the virtual machine, in the case that you make outbound requests. So for this use case, for the Linux VM to have an outbound connection to the internet, you're gonna have to go to your backend pools, go to the Linux one. Actually, never mind, not that. The pool is fine, but we gotta change the load balancing rule, or the Linux. Yeah, the load balancing rule, because inbound NAT rules is for connecting to it. And go to your Linux rule, and down here it says outbound source network address translation as SNAT, and I have on recommended, which is what you're supposed to. It uses outbound rules to provide backend pool members across the internet, but if you use implicit, then it could cause port exhaustion. So if it was on this one, then you change the default to the recommended one. And so now SNAT should work. So we said, we could have outbound rules, but we don't have any, right? So let me show that it actually won't work until you add an outbound rule. So we're going to connect again, backend pool, no, front end IP, get the Linux one. Copy. Alright, this wants to play that. Let's do that 111. And I changed its port 4002 according to the inbound NAT rules. Log in. Alright, so we're in. And so let's try to make like an outbound request to the internet. So let's do sudo apt install, and let's try to install on MySQL server. And it's going to ask if you want to, you say yes. And it's not going to work. It's going to stay at 0% forever because it's trying to reach the internet and it can't. So I'll just leave that there. So what we need to do is actually create an outbound rule. So you should do that. You go to outbound rules, you add one. We'll call it Linux outbound rule. And front end IP, choose the Linux one. Go through TCP, we'll keep that. We'll choose the Linux pool, and we'll say manually choose the number of, and select how, ports per instance. It has to be multiples of 8, so 8's fine. We'll add it. Again, look, it didn't work, unable to fetch. But now when we try, it should work. Alright, so it's created. Let's see. And let's do the same thing. Let's clear sudo apt install MySQL server. It'll give me a guess. And look, it's doing it. And it worked, so now we have that. And anyway, that's just how to use SNAT, and make sure that you add outbound rules.